In the early 2000s, New York City's music scene was experiencing a renaissance with bands like The Strokes, TV on the radio, and today's topic, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, a trio that went on to leave an indelible mark on indie rock with their raw energy, innovative sound, and unforgettable hits. And perhaps no hit has left a bigger mark than today's topic, Maps, which just this year topped the Billboard TikTok charts. The story of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs begins at Oberlin College in Ohio, where frontwoman Karen O met drummer Brian Chase. Karen O, the daughter of Korean and Polish parents, was pretty quiet and reserved as a kid, and a good student, doodling a lot, much different than her onstage persona people came to know her for. As a teenager growing up in New Jersey, she had a punk-loving friend who took her to the Big Apple to witness shows by Sonic Youth, Pavement, the John Spencer Blues Explosion, and PJ Harvey. She attended art school at Oberlin College, and it was during the orientation field trip for the freshmen she met her future bandmate drummer Brian Chase on the bus, with him remarking that both their post-secondary careers resulted in incredibly useful degrees. For Chase, his idea after school was that he'd move to New York and maybe get a gig playing in a band by John Zorn and live in Brooklyn, where some Oberlin graduates were already living. Chase started taking drum lessons when he was 5 or 6. He grew up in the suburbs of New York and was a teenager during the 90s. New York at the time was a hodgepodge of different scenes, and he grew up studying jazz and classical music while also playing in Green Day cover bands in his friends' basements. Karen and Brian lived in the same building at college. They referred to their building as the Monastery and the Nunnery because it was the only non-co-ed dorm. They soon became friends. Karen, for the first time in her life, didn't feel like an outsider like she did in high school, which was all white. She remarked to The Guardian that everyone at Oberlin felt like an outsider. She didn't start playing guitar until she went to college. The first song she learned was by Mazzy Star. She recalled what happened next, telling an interviewer, "A buddy of mine, he introduced me to Neil Young, who I have to say was extremely influential. He's got that super unconventional voice, but so much feeling, so much heart." Once she learned to play a little bit of guitar, Karen started writing her own tunes. Not long after this, Karen transferred to NYU in 2000. It was here through mutual friends she met photographer and guitarist and keyboardist Nick Zinner at Mars Bar. By the summer of 2000, Zinner and Karen were playing music together at her apartment. Zinner recalled how Karen was playing him songs that she'd written on acoustic guitar, remembering, "All her songs were really morbid," which he saw as a challenge, adding, "These are great, but I can make them better." They went on to form an acoustic duo called the Unitard. For Karen, she was very non-committal in her life up until this point, and for the first time she felt like she wanted to commit to something, which was music. She even got a tattoo of a bee on her shoulder to commemorate this new chapter in her life. Zinner recalled what the scene in New York was like at the time, remarking, "When I moved here, it was awful because everyone was so serious and cool and into heroin. All the bands were dark and serious. We had our dark band. Unitard was super dark. But that lightness, that silliness was inside us, and Karen was an expert in bringing it out and embodying it. We really needed that, and New York needed that too." Soon enough, Karen came up with the idea of forming a rock band. But Zinner was reluctant, thinking that Unitard was a cool project. Her answer to his reluctance, though, was just for him to trust her. They soon formed the group Yeah Yeah Yeahs, whose name was taken from a conversation they overheard at a bar. For Zinner, the group offered a new opportunity. He told Spin, "When I was younger, the music would always come from a place of frustration or depression. And when the Yeah Yeah Yeahs started, it was about opposing that idea. We wanted to write uplifting pop songs that could make us happier." So Zinner and Karen began working in Zinner's loft in New York, a place that he shared with about a dozen people or so. It definitely wasn't legal at the time. The pair was soon drinking rum fruit cocktails and fooling around with a drum machine, and they wrote 4 songs in just 2 hours. Half of those songs appeared on the group's first EP, with the track Bang being the first song they ever wrote. Karen admitted how hugely influenced she was by the 80s funk group ESG when writing that tune. Karen and Zinner went through a few different lineups, even being a 4-piece at one point, and then they eventually downsized to a three-piece and opted not to have a bass player. In 2000, they got the opportunity to open for the White Stripes' The Mercury Lounge, being the fifth band on the bill. As the gig approached, though, their drummer revealed he couldn't make it because he was already playing in 4 other bands. Zinner suggested to Karen O that they should just perform as Unitard instead. But by chance, Karen's old college friend Brian had moved down to New York, and he was able to fill in. During the gig, Brian's snare broke, so he had to borrow Meg White's snare. Zinner recalled, "I remember they were nice," referring to the White Stripes, "but when we were setting up, Jack was really bummed that there was another band without a bass player that was opening up for them." Soon enough, the band were winning over fans with their explosive live performances. Frontwoman Karen O saw many comparisons to PJ Harvey, Debbie Harry, David Bowie, and Pat Benatar. The group released their first EP in the summer of 2001, which won rave reviews. Along with groups like The Strokes, New York was now being hailed as a mecca for new emerging rock artists. A single from their EP, Our Time, was voted the second best single of 2001 by New Musical Express. Yeah 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 soon hit the road across America, opening for the likes of The Strokes, Girls Against Boys, and Sleater Kinney. By 2002, they were bubbling up to the surface on a lot of people's radars. They soon found a following in the UK, and they headlined their own shows there too, and opened for the John Spencer Blues explosion. Rolling Stone labeled them as one of the most exciting bands at the time. Yeah Yeah Yeahs were now the talk of the industry, and they even stole the show at South by Southwest around 2002. Allegedly even destroying the backstage area and knocking Courtney Love to the floor when she tried to hobnob with the band after the concert. It felt like things were blowing up so fast, Zinner recalled. "We were all pretty freaked out by the vultures descending. We were the it band or whatever, and there was so much crazy hype. It felt good, but it also felt super weird. Weirdo label people were calling me at home on my cell phone. It was like, how did you get this number?" Karen O's onstage clothes also garnered a lot of attention, as no two outfits looked the same and paled in comparison to the manufactured looks so many pop stars and female-fronted groups had. It was a friend of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs from the scene, Asif Ahmed, who was roughly the same age as them, who became their manager. Every label the band started to meet with told the group to fire him because he was too unpredictable and outspoken. Sarush Alvi, one of the founders of Vice Media, recalled how the group's manager was basically telling label bosses to At one meeting with Atlantic Records, their manager was throwing drinks in the face of their A&R guy and calling him a piece of shit. The band recorded their first LP mostly without a label, and they self-financed it. They also chose to work with friends rather than industry heavyweights, enlisting David Siddick, who was in the band TV on the Radio. Siddick was Karen and Zinner's boss when they worked at the clothing store 555 Soul in Brooklyn. The trio at one point almost signed with Warner Brothers, but Seymour Stein fell asleep at a dinner meeting. The band was offered $1.5 million on the strength of one EP from one of the labels interested in signing them, but their manager was super protective and turned down the offer because he knew if they took $1 million plus advance, they'd be in debt to the label for their whole career. You have to remember, CD sales were now slipping at this point in time, and Brian's father even called the group's manager and asked him how he could turn down a $1.5 million offer, to which he responded, "If I take $1.5 million, the label is going to own the catalog for the rest of the band's lives." The Yeah Yeah Yeahs ended up signing with Jimmy Iovine's Interscope, but they had some conditions like no interference from the label to adjust their sound or image. One of the songs on the group's first LP would become their signature track, Maps. Maps was written in a matter of minutes in Zinner's room with a blue drum machine and a 4-track recorder. Zinner had come up with a drum loop. Karen had heard Zinner playing the memorable riff, and the rest followed. Karen recalled about the song, "I was really lovelorn at the time. They Don't Love You Like I Love You was straight from a love letter, and I just plucked it out of there because I thought it had a good ring to it. I say love letter, but it was a email." Recording their first LP, the band was also dealing with an upcoming tour in the summer of 2002. They were at a crossroads. Do they focus on finishing the record or go play overseas? Karen O felt an enormous amount of pressure. The organizers even offered to triple the band's payment, but they still said no. Karen reportedly said at the time, "The whole thing is spiraling out of control and we need to get a solid foundation first. I definitely felt like I was on the verge of a meltdown. I knew that if we just continued the way we were going, I was going to burn out much too quickly, and that was more important than pleasing promoters and believing all this hype was just to get our record done. So the band ended up canceling that tour to focus on finishing up their first LP. For a period of time, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs got the reputation of being the no-no-nos or maybe-maybe-maybes for turning down gigs, canceling gigs, and saying no to things like Saturday Night Live and no to Vanity Fair's music issue, as well as to brand deals. But as the band saw it, it was a way of self-preservation. Fever to Tell was released on April 29, 2003. Despite winning praise from critics and making many best-of lists for the year, it wasn't a huge commercial success initially. The first single, Date with the Night, didn't chart in America, but reached number 16 in the UK. It was later released as DLC for the video game Rock Band. The second single, Pin, peaked at number 29 in the UK. And by the end of the year, the album barely sold 100,000 copies in the States. The group's manager, Asif Ahmed, believed that the Grammy nominations the band received in late 2003 for Best Alternative Album made Interscope take note, adding, "That's what propelled the push for Maps. They were up against the White Stripes, so their profile raised exponentially, but in a credible way." It's kind of amazing because through some of the things I've read about the band, it seemed like initially they were against putting Maps out as a single. But in a separate interview, Karen O told Spin, "The only reason I wanted to be on a major label was for people to hear Maps," with her adding that she saw it as the kind of song that could score a teen romance. After much coaxing from their label, Interscope released Maps as a single in late 2003. And by January of the following year, it was embraced by MTV and audiences. Despite the cliche that we hear from so many bands that they didn't know a particular song was going to be a hit, Karen O admitted that the moment they wrote the track, they knew it was going to be a hit. The song ended up peaking at number 87 on the Hot 100 chart and number 9 on the Alternative Airplay chart.
Well, my kind's your kind, I'll stay the same kind.
It became the Yeah Yeah Yeahs' biggest hit of their career. The song is a simple statement of passion for a particular person. Karen O told Rolling Stone, "There's a lot of love in that song, but there's a lot of fear too. I exposed myself so much with that song, kind of shocked myself." In the video for the song, she's pictured on stage in front of a half-empty school hall. The camera closes in on her face as she sings the words, and she starts to cry. She would tell WENN in 2007, "They were real tears. My boyfriend at the time was supposed to come to the shoot. He was 3 hours late and I was about to leave for tour." The song was written about her then boyfriend Angus Andrew of the group Liars, with her adding, "I didn't even think he was going to come, and this was a song that was written for him. He eventually showed up and I got myself in a real emotional state." In fact, one rumor was that MAP stands for My Angus Please Stay. Their relationship was difficult because both musicians were in bands and they were touring and they spent much time apart. As a result, the relationship didn't last. Following the release of Fever to Tell, Karen moved to Los Angeles and the relationship ended. Even before Maps became a huge hit, Karen O started to reconsider her onstage persona. Part of that was due to what she referred to as the enemy incident. In March of 2003, New Musical Express magazine, who had previously shot the band, photographed Karen during a live show, a shot that was straight up her skirt. The group's drummer Brian Chase recalled, "I think the enemy thing was really painful. The Fever to Tell Karen O was exhibitionist. She felt it was her job to make people feel less self-conscious about themselves, that letting go and expressing herself like that on stage would make people feel comforted, but after a while I think she just felt exploited." Another part of reconsidering her persona was her health problems. During an October 2003 show in Australia, she fell headfirst off stage into the photo pit, injuring her back. In the years since its release, the song Maps has inspired one of the biggest pop hits of 2004, Kelly Clarkson's Since You've Been Gone, which was written and produced by Max Martin and Dr. Luke. In an interview with Billboard, Dr. Luke stated, "That was a conscious move by Max and myself because we were listening to alternative and indie music. I said, I love that song," and Max was like, "If they would just write a damn pop chorus on it." And when he said that, it was just like light bulb. Why don't we do that? Both maps and Since You've Been Gone shared similar introductions, a post-chorus guitar breaks, middle eights, and are both in the key of G major. Despite providing the inspiration for the Kelly Clarkson tune, Karen O wasn't impressed, telling Rolling Stone that the similarity was, and I quote, like getting bitten by a poisonous varmint. The 2016 Beyonce song, Hold Up, contains an interpolation of the lyrics for Maps.
They don't love you like I love you. Step down, they don't love you like I love you.
Maps was also featured as an on-disc track for the video game Rock Band 1 in 2007, exposing the track to a whole new audience. Just this year, the song gained widespread popularity on TikTok and topped Billboard's TikTok charts. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Rock Culture Story. Sticker.